So, last night I watched a horror film, and horror is putting it lightly. This may be one of the best, if not the best, horror films ever made. And you know, when I think about this, I think of other great movies like The Shining, The Exorcist, you know, in terms of horror. But this movie is incredible. What movie am I talking about? Jacob's motherfucking Ladder. I watched this movie while I was, you know, moderately dosed on magic mushrooms. I was not gonna lie, I was fucked up. And I've seen this movie before as a fan of the Silent Hill series of video games. I know that this movie directly inspired the Silent Hill games in a lot of ways. So I watched it a long time ago, but watching this film on mushrooms, I gotta tell you, man, it fucked me up. It fucked me up. It fucked me up. And I'm not gonna lie, I was scared. Like, I was horrified. There were parts of this movie that had me, like in tears a little bit. Like, at least at the verge, you know. This is a scary fucking movie. Now, again, I just want to come out here and tell you that this is a perfect movie. There is not a single flaw in this entire film. It is a perfect movie. And if you disagree, you're stupid, and you need to do some research, read a couple books, and watch it again. If you don't think this movie is perfect, you are dumb. You have a low IQ. And I say that with all due respect. You know, I feel bad for you. I do. But this movie is perfect. And I will explain why. Visually, right? This is a 1990 film, right? So, you know, visually the effects are all practical. There's a lot of monsters in this movie. Again, if you've played the Silent Hill games, you know, you're familiar with some of the monsters. A lot of them in the Silent Hill games are directly pulled from Jacob's Ladder. The monsters are disgusting. They're grotesque. My favorite monster in this film is probably the doctor with no eyeballs. Not just like with eye sockets, right? But they're sewn shut or something. We're talking like there's nothing here. It's just like skin, okay? Like that's fucking creepy. This movie features one of my favorite tropes, the unreliable narrator. Now, you know, in this movie, it's not a narrator per se. It's just the protagonist who is, you don't know what's real. You don't know what's real. You don't know what's a dream. You don't know what dreams are. You don't know what flashbacks are. This movie, the opening scene takes place in the Vietnam War. The main character is seen being involved in a very gruesome chemical attack. It's very unclear what's going on. There's a lot of like, the opening scene alone is a masterpiece. I mean, again, I gotta tell you, this is a perfect movie. It's a perfect fucking movie. But the opening scene shows the main character kneeling on the ground, and he's staring at his friends, his soldiers, his comrades, whatever, as there's explosions, people's body parts are falling off. There's blood everywhere. One of the most gruesome moments is where they show someone who's got his whole like below his knee is all like destroyed, and then like his like foot is like limping off of him and then kind of like falls off. It's disgusting, but it's real. It shows like real style of like warfare. Then it picks up, he wakes up from a dream, and it turns out, you know, he's a Vietnam veteran, and it's just a trauma flashback. And then he goes about, he lives his life, you know, he's a postal worker, and I don't know how to describe this movie. And I say this a lot, and I mean it, and I know a lot of you people don't listen to me. If you have not seen this movie, I need you to, whatever it is you're doing, if you're still listening to this, pause it, bookmark it, go find this movie, Wherever you, I don't care. Skip a meal. If you can't afford it, skip a fucking meal. Don't eat for a day. Fasting for 36 hours can have health benefits anyway. Buy the movie if you need to. Wherever you need to see it, you got to fucking watch this movie. So again, I'm going to get into the heavy spoilers. But this is, I swear to fucking God, if you let me spoil a movie like this, you're destroying your life. It's a cognito hazard, okay? So, as this character is going through his daily life, there's, lots of weird stuff that's happening to him. He, falls asleep on a subway, which, by the way, Silent Hill 3, if you play, I love the Silent Hill series of video games. I discovered this movie several years ago through the Silent Hill, connection. But I don't think watching this movie several years ago, I did not understand it at the deepest level that I think I understand it now. But again, the subway scene, he wakes up on a subway from another trauma flashback, and he's like, oh shit, I missed my exit or whatever. And then weird stuff starts to happen. He gets off on the subway. All the exits are blocked by chain link fences. What? Sounds familiar if you've played Silent Hill. He sees a subway train car with strange looking demons or creatures with it's hard to see their faces because the windows, it blurs because the train is moving so fast. But they're all at the windows like this, with their hands up next to them, and they're saying some fucked up, looking weird, you can kind of make out a little blood and just very strange stuff. And so eventually he gets out of the subway, he gets home, he meets the woman he lives with, which is also, it's revealed that he has an ex-wife as well. So, he had a wife, went to Vietnam, something happened, they broke up, his kid died. This is all revealed in this scene, right? He sees a photo of the kid who died, and he starts crying, and it's a traumatic incident for him. But then, the new woman that he's dating, she's super young. She doesn't appreciate, the baggage that he has. And, that's, one of the big issues in their relationship is, he has kids and she doesn't whatever. But anyway, turns out that they're also co-workers. They work at the post office together. So, again, he goes through his daily life, whatever. Weird stuff is happening. There's a scene where he's getting chased by a car. Very strange, right? But and he tries to explain it to the woman that he's living with, who's also his coworker. Weird stuff is happening to me. I feel like I'm seeing demons. And then she's trying to say they're just homeless people. They're just drug addicts, little fucked up. But again, it's on purpose, right? The messaging here is very purposeful. This movie has a lot of war on drugs kind of stuff in it. So, it's the gaslighting. It's the unreliable narrator. Are we seeing an interpretation of the real world, or are we seeing the world through the eyes of Jacob Singer, who's the primary character in this movie? Also featured in this movie is pre-Seinfeld Jason Alexander, who plays essentially the same character as he plays in Seinfeld, George Costanza. Same acting style. It's really great. So if you want to see some pre-Seinfeld Jason Alexander, check out Jacob's Ladder. But he's a lawyer. And, at some point, the main character is trying to get a lawsuit going on and doesn't go well. I mean, this movie, my favorite scene, if I were to talk about my favorite scene, is the party scene. There's a scene where we don't know how we got there. There's a lot of, again, so that we see, throughout the movie, Vietnam War flashbacks. He wakes up somewhere. And that's kind of how, the scenes start, is he just wakes up in random areas from a Vietnam flashback, right? One time he's at a party. He's on a subway, right? There's all, he's at home, right? But my favorite scene in this movie, which is also the hardest scene to watch, I literally had to, look away. It was very hard to watch. Now, again, I'm on drugs. I'm having an emotional time watching this film. But the scene where he's at the party and there's someone sitting on the stairway, and the symbolism here is extremely important. He's walking, he's trying to find a bathroom or whatever. He's going up a stairway. There's someone sitting on the stairway. It's like an L shape, right? So there's like a middle portion and then it 90-degree angle, right? So someone's sitting there at the party who's like a hand reader. And the key line here is that the hand reader says, like, you know, she's looking palms, whatever it is, and she's like, oh, you're already dead. And that's like the first major tell for what's going on in this film, is that this film essentially takes place in the end of life purgatory. That, you know, like when you die, your brain produces like hallucinations that are based on all of your memories. Now, again, if you've ever, you know, I've done a lot of psychedelic drugs and I've had ego death many times. So this is like something that I would say is similar. When I've experienced ego death, I have experienced dream-like stitching of like random memories, you know, like, oh, I'm like 8 years old and I'm in the house I grew up in. Oh, I'm over here. Oh, I'm over here. Right. So, and now again, that's in a safe way that doesn't involve actually getting killed in Vietnam. Right. But so it explores that kind of concept of being in a purgatory. And again, if you didn't watch this movie and you let me spoil it for you, I like, honestly, I don't say anything about that in the chat, because I'll ban you for a month or something. Because again, I swear to God. But anyway, the party scene is just so hard to watch. There's like bright lights, right? And like he's uncomfortable at this party, right? And it's like a work party. You see people from the post office there. You also, like, again, like the characters. There's so many extras and there's so many characters, but they're like the same people from different parts of his life, but dressed up differently. So a lot of the scenes you see like his fellow soldiers from Vietnam in areas that don't make any sense. You see his coworkers from the post office in areas that don't make any sense, right? And again, you see them in the background. You know, he doesn't acknowledge them a lot of the time, and it's very well done. But the party scene where you have the loud music, you got the flashing lights, and you got like the monsters like tying themselves with the reality, and he has like a trauma episode. And again, throughout the movie, you know, watching this movie for the first time, you're thinking, oh, it's just he's a veteran with PTSD, right? And so when you look at this movie through that lens, right, it's still perfect, right? And that's the thing about this movie, is it plays on so many different kinds of things, like near-death experience, end-of-life experience, PTSD, hallucinogens, right? Like it covers so many really deep topics, but each one is done perfectly. It plays with the U.S. government kidnapping people and sending them to war. That's a big theme in this movie. It's an anti-war movie, of course, right? And it just plays each one with the perfect mood, with the perfect intensity, with the perfect like cautiousness. It's just perfect. It's again, I gotta tell you, it's a perfect movie. And I know a lot of the times I come up here and I tell you that's a perfect movie. This is a perfect movie. And a lot of the times I come up here and say this movie's okay, whatever. But I need you to understand, when I say a perfect movie, S tier, 10 out of 10, no flaws. It's in a category with other movies that I would say like Beyond the Black Rainbow. You know, it's a perfect movie. It changes the way you look at the world. You know, you watch this shit. Jacob's Ladder is among one of the best movies ever made. So anyway, the party scene is my favorite. It's hard to watch. It's just really hard to watch. I don't like, not just because of the monsters being scary, but just like what the scenes represent. And again, so he just wakes up in like his home. He wakes up in his old life, the pre-Vietnam life, with his, what we understand to be ex-wife. But again, whatever. So he wakes up there and is like, oh, was the whole movie up until now a dream? What's going on? He says that like he was dreaming. So he talks about to his ex-wife, who's in this timeline now his current wife, saying, oh, I had this dream that my coworker was living with me and that, I went to Vietnam or what, and all that kind of stuff. And then he sees like, his dead kid shows up, and then it's like, oh shit, I dreamed that my kid was dead. And again, watching this movie on mushrooms, it was a hard watch. Like, and again, if you've got, PTSD issues, be very careful watching this because I got some PTSD issues. I've had a lot of bad stuff happen to me in my life. And so like watching a movie like this on drugs is very scary. So again, caution is all I can tell you. But it is, you get a different, watching this movie sober is a different, you're not watching the same movie. You're seeing and appreciating and feel, it's like, like movies that are 3D, right? Like, oh, it's coming at me. It's 3D, right? Now, when you watch a movie like this on a psychedelic drug, it's not 3D. It's like 10D, right? You're feeling, it's like 38 dimensions, right? You're feeling every emotional factor in this movie. You're feeling it like viscerally, right? It can trigger you. Watching, again, the party scene for me, it triggered the shit out of me. It was hard to watch. I had to look away. I had to like take moments away from watching the movie just to like not fall into the bad trip zone, right? Like, it's a hard watch, but it's an experience. And again, not every experience needs to be necessarily good, whatever that means. Good and bad are just made up terms. But this is an experience that, again, it's like watching a movie in 3D. When you watch a movie like this on a psychedelic drug, you got to be careful. It's like showing a 3D movie to a kid. Oh shit, the shark's going to eat their head off. They might get nightmares. It's like that, but a whole different level. So anyway, the movie progresses. One of my other favorite scenes is the bathtub scene when he has a fever of 106. And like, he just like, so he just wakes up in a random moment of his life and he's sick. He's burning up, right? And his coworker, post office girlfriend now again. So he wakes up and again, in this world, he is sick. He's 106 fever, right? So the girlfriend throws him in the bathtub. And like, again, the way that like the lead actor, Tim Robbins, I believe, plays it so well. Like the way he's acting delirious, like the way he walks, like he can't walk straight and he falls down. And I mean, again, the scene where they're dumping ice on him. One of the key phrases here is after the fact, he said something along the lines of like, I was being burned by ice. And like, that's one of those like brain buster phrases. And it's just, and again, it bleeds into the Vietnam flashbacks of when he's in the Vietnam War, he gets injured, and he's, he's in the medical tent and he's being worked on. They're trying to save his life. And then it bleeds back into the bathtub scene, right? It's just, I mean, I could spend hours I could spend double the amount of time that it takes to watch this movie talking about this movie. Again, it's a perfect movie. I don't say this as often as you might think. I know I try to watch a lot of movies I really like, and I try to watch them many times. So it might sound like I overuse perfect movie. But I swear to God, and I don't believe in God, but this is a perfect movie. I don't even know what to say. Like, it's just a perfect movie. Again, so another factor of this is one of his Vietnam War buddies calls him up after like 5 or 6 years, and says like, I feel like I'm going to hell. And again, the way that they use that phrase, oftentimes when you hear the phrase, I'm going to hell, it's like, oh, I said something racist, I'm going to hell. Oh, I, made fun of a disabled person, I'm going to hell. It's like a flippant, oh, I said something bad, now let me just flippantly say, oh, in the future, I'm going to hell for this, or whatever. That's typically how you use the phrase, I'm going to hell, right? It's a flippant kind of like, I did something fucked up, and in the future, I'm going to go to hell. But his war buddy says, I'm going to hell, in a very literal present tense, right? And so his war buddy kind of explains the movie up until that point, and then the protagonist is like, I feel the same thing. I'm going to hell, right? Like, not like in the future, but as in you're literally walking, right, to hell, right? And as you walk deeper into hell, or walk down through the ladder as it is, right? Hell is looking at you, and you see, and you interact with it, right? So it's a very present tense way to use that phrase that's not often used in that fashion. And so one of the themes is that like the Vietnam War buddy gets killed shortly after meeting with him. He says that the demons are chasing him and he's being followed. Later in the film, He tries to group up with the rest of his Vietnam War buddies from his platoon, and they all decide to do the lawsuit. This is where George Costanza comes in. And basically, eventually, all the Vietnam buddies, they back off, they get scared, and they call the protagonist and say, "We're out. You're on your own." But the protagonist is still trying to engage in this lawsuit against the U.S. government for the crimes that were committed against him in the war in Vietnam. And that's what the Vietnam War is. It is a crime against humanity, right? And then, again, the symbolism here is very shortly after this part. Government agents kidnap him. Like, they grab him and throw him in the back of a car and tell him to, like, cut it out, essentially, stop asking questions, etc., right? And that's a metaphor for, again, the draft, right? Think about this, right? You're, like, the main character is shown to be, like, he's got a doctorate in the arts or something, like a master's degree, I think, in the arts, right? He's like a philosopher, he's an artist, right? And then he was kidnapped by the U.S. government to go to this war, right? For no reason, to kill innocent people, and the government forces you to. And again, in these so-called wars, the government has been documented doing experiments on their own soldiers, just like putting them in really terrible conditions, right? Just to see what they would do, giving them certain kinds of drugs just to see what they would do, right? And again, it's slavery, it's kidnapping. So again, the metaphor is in a very literal sense, right? They kidnap him, U.S. government agents kidnap him in a car and tell him that he can't do anything about it and to just listen and it gets easier, etc., right? But he escapes them, but in the escaping of the, in escaping the U.S. government agents, he gets injured and ends up going to the hospital. And then again, this is like the climax of the movie is starting. And again, if you've played the Silent Hill games, again, I got 1 and 2 right here because, I always keep them. I always have Silent Hill within arm's reach. You never know when you got to talk about them. But anyway, the hospital scene is like, we're talking like, if you've played Silent Hill PS1, the first one, it's 1-to-1, exactly like the hospital area in Silent Hill. There's the chain link ceiling, the chain link fence attached to the ceiling. There's creatures walking along the fences, right? This is where you see the doctors like operating on him. One of the doctors is his girlfriend from the post office, right? And again, it's just like, when you're in these like weird, and I've been in similar situations when I've experienced ego death on psychedelic drugs, where I will see people, just random people, family members, whatever, friends, whatever, just showing up in context that they've never been in, and it's just like in dreams I've had, so it blends the reality. And one of the doctors, the main character is like, "Get me out of here, please, get me out of here." And then one of the doctors is like, "There is no out of here. You got killed, remember? You're dying. You're dead." And so, and then he wakes up again, right? He wakes up, and that's one of the themes of this movie is he constantly is waking up in a new context, and every context doesn't make sense. And it's just, I don't even know how to describe it, man. I mean, this movie is perfect. Once again, it's a perfect movie. The music is perfect. The cinematography, and how, like, one of my favorite aspects of the cinematography is the lighting. This movie has a lot of really explicit usages of lighting, like when he's talking to his Vietnam buddy in the bar scene, and then like there's like all the blinds are closed, but then there's one part where he looks outside and you see the light peer in, right? There's just so much in this movie that you can talk about. I mean, again, it's a perfect movie. You have to watch it. If you've seen it before, watch it again. If you've seen it sober, again, proceed with caution. But, if that's something you're interested in, watching a movie like this on drugs is scary. I mean, again, it's very scary. It's like watching a 3D movie, except instead of it being 3D, it's like 38 dimensions. It's like 69 dimensions, right? You're experiencing the film on levels that you just cannot do without drugs. And again, it's not for everybody. Proceed with caution. I would say start on the low end and not on the high end, be very careful. But this is a movie that just totally destroys, you know, it just destroys your brain, man. It's fucked up. It's scary. It's horrifying. It's, you know, there's just so much to it. It's a very political movie, right? The whole movie is basically a condemnation of the war on drugs and the Vietnam War and the draft. That's essentially the whole movie, is just a condemnation of the government's actions throughout the 1960s and 70s. It's just a perfect movie, man. You gotta watch it. Jacob's Ladder. I mean, Jesus Christ. I mean, fuck. I mean, shit. I mean, I don't even, like, what else can you say about it? It's a perfect fucking movie. I could go on and describe every scene in depth, but I think I've said enough. Watch the movie now. Like, as soon as the stream is over, find out where you can watch it. I don't care. Oh, I don't know. Blah, 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 but whatever excuse you want to come up with, I don't give a fuck. Skip a meal if you have to, right? Sell some personal belongings at a pawn shop if you have to. Watch this movie. It will change your life. It's crazy. It's crazy. If you're after, like, dark, visceral, cerebral, and again, horror, not in, like, you know, in the cheesy Frankenstein monster movie horror, which I love. No offense to that. But this is horror in like you need to develop a new word to describe how horrifying it is. Again, it is a terrifying movie. It is probably the scariest movie I've ever seen on drugs. I've watched, you know, one of the things I like to do is, you know, do some mushrooms and watch horror movies. I watched The Shining. I've watched, you know, all the Panos Cosmatos movies on mushrooms, and this movie was the hardest to get through. It is, I mean, The Shining is a hard movie to get through on mushrooms, but this movie, I mean, again, there were so many instances where I was scared for my life. I mean, it's a very difficult movie to watch. But again, even if you watch it sober, it's worth it. It's a great movie. It's a perfect movie. Maybe one of the best movies ever made. Again, if I were to construct a list of like the top 10 movies ever made, Jacob's Ladder is on it. It's a perfect film. Go watch it. So anyway,